I should preamble by saying, I was thinking about this. Design and art is one thing. Working with wood and making stuff is another. So the first is art, and that's what we talked about last time, where you're responding to some emotional impulse and trying to get at it by externalizing drawings or sculpture or something. Building for me is more of a meditation. I just know how all the pieces work. I know how the tools work. And so I pretty much get into it and just let my hands do the walking. For instance, so this is the project that got interrupted by the project outside, which is life. This is a set of doors that I need to make, and I could buy the doors. I could easily, this will cost me more to make, but I wanted to see if I could wrap a bead. This is a bead, this little bump here, this trim piece, it's called a bead. I want to see if I could wrap a bead around a door, a mortise and tenon joint, which I've never done before. And it's kind of tough because I don't know if you can see this, but the profile is a flat recess with the bead at the lower level. And then to wrap that around a joint means you have to cut it out in a kind of a funky way so that the bead meets and the plane meets, and then this part disappears. And so so I'm doing I know that this is Douglas fir, and that would be expensive to experiment with. So I'm just trying to figure out how to do the joint with just some cheap framing lumber. And just before you came here, I thought, okay, so what I want to do is, I want this bead to miter around here, and I want this recessed plane to miter around here. If I just cut a miter like this, like that might work. Or I could cut a miter just here and here, and that would also work. So that's what I'm going to try first. Other than, as an architect, you always have to write specs that say, this is what I want, this is how I want it done. So I end up being like a quick study on a bunch of stuff that I don't get to do, but I get to tell much more talented people how to do it. So this is me practicing what I preach, so to speak. And I'm thinking, okay, I want to cut that little angle right there, but I can't make that line, that angled line, on this bumpy surface. So I make it back here and trust that I can cut, straight enough, or tune it up after I cut it. And I'm thinking the depth of that cut needs to be no more, I don't want to overcut, so it needs to be no more than that depth. So if I just put a line there. Okay, so I want to cut down to here, and then eventually I'm going to cut out that whole piece. And I think the tool of choice for me this time is going to be the bandsaw over here. If I was an old world craftsman, I'd do it all with hand tools and chisels and little hand saws, of which I have. But this is going to suit our timing better, I think. So just, and this is sort of no guarantee that this will work, but that's what you learn. That's how you learn. So, totally safe. That's right. Okay, so there's that cut. Then for the more difficult cut, Just want to cut. And this blade is dull, so I've got all my excuses lined up. Okay, so that's not great, but it's a start. At least we can see now if the joint, okay, so now you can see I have, it's an offset because now I need to make a matching cut right there so that this can slide that distance. Looks like it's too much, but we'll see. So we should be able to do this. See, what I should have is a completed perfect joint so that after you film all this, you can say, see, this is the finished product. But this is what I love. It's like you don't really know what you're doing, but it's the materials and the tools are talking to you. Come on. That's going to take that off, and that just double check here. Yep, that's what we want. Let's see. Now, we'll just see if this is, ooh, terrible. So now what I can see is that I have to cut off some of this, and it looks like, and also this doesn't look like it's parallel there, but that's because I rough cut that poorly. But let's and also, see, that would be perfect if that were, this is a sloppy way to do this, but yeah, that's definitely going to be. So this is why we do you do trial joints, is just because you learn so much stuff doing the work. It takes a few times to get any good at it. Let's see if that. So. So there's a slight angle to this cut. That should do it. Little noise here. And I don't know. Okay, well that's close. So, see, so taking that off allows that. So you can sort of see the concept. The bead wraps around, the rabbited out plane wraps around, and then this would be, that be. Whoop, that's not gonna work. Wrap it around. That should do. Okay, so pretty, not good enough for furniture, but good enough for concept. So that's the joint that I'm looking to make in this nice wood, and without the paint all over it. And what I have to do is make sure that these joints are really nice and tight. But that looks like it's going to work. And I also probably will tighten that up. Just taking more care. But as a quick demonstration of that's the joint that I want to make for these doors, that's going to work. So then these doors are going to be, that tall and about that wide. So this is one side of the door. It's a set of double doors, so that nothing is easy. The hinging will be different. But see how narrow they are? I love this. So it could have been one door, but with two little doors, it'll just look better. And you know something? If I were doing this for a client, I never would accept the bead going right through this knot, and a bunch of other stuff would not be acceptable for a client. But for me, making something like this and then having it in your house is like a story. You get to relive the making of it every time you open the door. So it's fine. So that's my woodworking for the day. Okay. So way back when we set this up, this was where Yes Tomorrow started. And people said, you can't run a school in this dink shop. And I said, the whole point is to show homeowners that are going to come to the school, you don't need much to learn how to build. And so in this was an old pig barn. And yeah, it was an old pig barn, and when we bought it, it had about 3 feet of clearance in the underneath, just enough for a pig. And so this is where the rough lumber comes in. But when I bought it, grade was about there. So there was that was your headroom. And I thought, gosh, why didn't they put a bigger basement in here? Careful your foot here. And so we started to dig it out by hand and figured out why they didn't put a bigger basement in. There was a piece of ledge that started about there and went up over here, just huge. And I thought, oh my God, what will we do? We need to blast that out. I called up a few blasters and they said, no, you can't blast, that's impossible. And then somebody said to me, do you know Leonard Robinson? And I said, I've heard that name. And Leonard came down and looked at it and said, yeah, we can blast out this huge piece of ledge in the basement with only 3 feet of clearance. And he did. He just used really small charges and lots of tires, and we basically blasted out about 5 feet of ledge and poured a slab. And now the way this shop works is the raw materials come in through these doors, people there, larger deliveries there. They get stored here, and then as I need them upstairs, this is all rough lumber, so that it goes through the planer here, gets dressed, and then in the winter it goes up that door. In the summer we just walk it around, and then also this is that goes up to the shop, and we can take a shot down that ladder so you can connect it. And then this is the dust collector, which I put in way late. I should have put it in the first day. If there's anything I would tell a young wood butcher, it would be put in your dust collector system immediately. So I would go up here. I would just take lumber and stick it up here, and then, I don't expect, oh, are you going to come? No, you should come around and connect the shot from, no, walk around. You going to do this? Sam is lost in that. There's a, you got it?
Yeah.
This is solid if you want to grab on that. Good work. Whoa, baby, you could. And so here we are in the shop. And then if we keep going around, we come up to the studio,
Yep.
which you've already shot, right? You got this. So this, for instance, this is another example of me doing something that it's just more complicated than it needed to be, but I wanted to do it. So it's a drop leaf table. And I always wondered, this is a kind of a sexy joint. It's this drop leaf joint you can see here. So did I need to do that? No, but it was fun to do it. And this is curly maple, so curly maple's really hard to get a good finish. I wouldn't say I got a good finish, but if you don't work it, then you don't know. So now if I'm speccing curly maple trim in a house, I know what I'm asking the tradespeople to do. And this is, yeah, so that's my coffee clutch. Pretty great. I know, that's a great one, isn't it? Oh. Okay. I have you to thank for finding these drawings. I'd completely lost these drawings. This is the guy wanted like a Hansel and Gretel house, and
That's so awesome.
just a scheme. I thought this was perfect, and then he said, yeah, this is perfect. I'm going to have Jim Sanford design it. To be able to build, because it's not a very reliable profession. So I'm going to draw on this pad, I think, not this pad. I don't want to crush your microphone while I sit on it. Oh, really? Did I turn it off, or is it because sometimes this is threaded. Okay, what I'll do is I'm going to all right, so. tree house. We used a bigger piece of paper, huh? I need is where is it? Where'd the little eraser go? Here's an eraser. There's the eraser. Let's do it. That'll work. Okay, so if that's a treehouse concept. Now let's go look and see if we can have a better understanding of it this way. Oh no, I have a better idea. What if there was okay, we have it. Somewhere here. So that could be it. So that would make. So here, what I'm trying to figure out is the zoning in a big tree house where I can have people living but keep the trees outside, because you don't want the trees inside the tree house. They don't like it. It looks like I could probably enter here. And this would be, right, so this would be, this could be, you know, like that. Okay, so there's the trees. Okay, that's a tree. Okay, so if this were the living space, let me just connect that all together. This is going to have to be, so, now, if this was the entry, let's see, this could be courtyard, I guess. Yeah, this is what we'll do. Okay, great. So this is okay. So that's going to be, I think maybe, so let's see, so if this is north, this is the big deck. Probably want this to be the bedroom area. So this will be, yeah, so this will be, I think that's going to be the entry, and this is all going to be, yeah, this will be a deck too. Okay. So it's going to be all. Okay. So probably, maybe we'll have the kitchen here. This will be the eating. This will be the hang. This is so these guys will be. Not sure about this yet. That might be bathroom. Let's say we'll call that bathroom. Which may mean that we want the kitchen to be over here. No, we can't do that. We can do this. Okay, so if that were the kitchen, and this were the bedroom, bed. Okay, let's take that another iteration. So this is how you just run ideas to ground. You just keep redrawing them. So this were the kitchen. And maybe like this. This is the door. This is the big sieve. So this would be the sitting, I guess, right? Yeah, this is a little deck. So people are going to come up here. This is open. Yep. This is call this the stairway to heaven. So this is your bath and bedroom. It also has a nice door out to the deck. Now, and this might be deck too. So this is so the way I do this is I actually have a model that I've made of the trees in question. And then I know that the model is completely approximate. It's not really accurate. So you just but I know that this is about the configuration of the three major trees. And so, let's think. I'm trying to think. This could be courtyard. So I guess that would allow the deck to go all the way through here, as long as it's outdoors. So you don't want the tree trunks to be inside the heated area. So that would be, right, so if you came up, okay, so
This is a single bedroom.
yeah, it's a single bedroom tree house, but it'll have different levels. So These stairs will probably go up to a second level, and there might be a small half level for business down below. The guy wants a little office space. So the deal is, if I look at it in elevation, so he wants, here's his grade, then he wants a conference area. I think the conference area maybe is at the most 5 feet up, and a small conference area. And then I think the trees are going to continue, and so the stairs will, let's do the stairs up to the big level's going to be up here. And this may not be that big, huh? And then trees will. So
it's work and residential?
yeah, this guy, I did a treehouse with him before, and so he said, look, I want to do another treehouse, and this time I want it to be not just a folly. I want to live there and I want to work there. He's a very successful corporate consultant, him and this one other partner. And he's got the moolah, and he's a very bright, open heart, very creative guy. And so, yeah, we'll make this happen. So I frequently get categorized as an artist, and my mother told me I was an artist, so I believed that I was an artist literally from day one. And that was because I could draw. But what is an artist? Big open question. And over the years, I've come to think, oh, gee, what people think of when they say, oh, he's an artist or she's an artist, is maybe not what I am. Maybe what I am is a maker. Maybe what I am is somebody who was blessed with a lot of great hand skills and good eye hand skills, and also thoughtful, reflective personality. So, I could and did right out of the gates build forts and tree houses and snow castles and anything I could get my hands on, I'd make something. And back in the 50s in New Jersey, you could just, none of the construction sites had chain link fences around them. So you could just, on your way home from school, pick up your building supplies, sort of free. It was New Jersey. And then you could find a forest that wasn't guarded and that who knows whose property it was on. And you could just insinuate yourself into the forest and start building your fantasy. And why wouldn't you do that? So I did that forever, it seems. And until my father, I pretty much stole all my father's tools and left them to rust in various forests and woods. But it was clear to others, not to myself, that I was somebody who was going to be creative. But my mother always said, no, you're going to be an artist. You're going to be an artist. So, and the only evidence I had for that was I was gifted with the ability to draw. I can draw anything. I can draw anything accurately by looking at it, and I can draw anything from imagination. So if you have an idea, I can draw that. I can pull that out of thin air. And I can, it's a facility. I'm not bragging about it, but you start to realize, oh, well, if you need a platypus, I can draw that. If you need a rocket ship, certainly I can draw that. If you need the inside of an engine, I can probably draw that. If you need a flower garden, I can draw that. And I can draw it either looking at it or I can invent it, because it just seems like the whole world is there for me to look at. And what I realized, so of course, when I got to college, I was I was a chemical engineer major because my father was a chemical engineer, and I was going to be a chemical engineer, even though my mother told me I was an artist. My mother, sadly, in many ways, died really young. So she told me I was an artist and then left. And my father said, no, actually, you're going to be a great chemical engineer. And so
How old were you when you were like tossing between the two? And
I always did both.
you always did both.
I had my home lab in the basement, and I had endless art supplies. And I was also a little bit of a prodigy at the various disciplinary schools that they would send me to. Not disciplinary, but they were. I was a handful. I was kind of not an ideal child. I acted out. I stole lumber. I built things. And I could draw anything, so that meant mostly I drew stuff that was fun and acceptable, but sometimes people would say, can you draw this? And it was not so great. I remember actually, not an example of that, but I remember in the 5th or 6th grade, I had an art teacher. Art class was once a week. It's my favorite class. And I had an art teacher. She was a RISD graduate, really, Mrs. Gosh, phenomenal woman. And after a while, and I was always making trouble in class. I was goofing off or making trouble, and so she, not just art class, not in art class actually, but all the other classes. And she said, John, why don't you just come in this other room? I have a special assignment for you. And she had a plaster bust of a woman, no head or arms, just the bust, a classic. For 5th grade, that was scandalous, And she said, can you draw that? And I said, sure, yeah, let's draw that. And then she coached me. She said, shading, and you got to do this, and line weight. She was giving me basic drawing instruction that you would expect to get at a much higher level. And she kept the door closed so that none of the other kids would see this because it was way advanced. But I totally saw it as, oh, this is an opportunity to make the best replica of that in 2 dimensions as possible. And it had no, sort of sexual or it was just, this is beauty, replicated. And that was not a secret. She was, a lot of teachers were sort of in cahoots to try to make Johnny a better boy because I was not a good student. I was not a good kid to have in your class at all. So yeah, everybody was, they knew, oh, he's lost his mother, so we should give him some slack, and so they did, and I had a great time with my drawing and with Mrs. Gosh, and then eventually I discovered that you could go away to a boarding school and just leave all these people behind, and so I did that, where there was amazing art opportunities, really, really great. Unbelievably trained professional artists who were, teaching you to be an artist. I mean, how to paint and how to mix colors and the whole color theory and, how lines work and how depth and perspective and all this stuff was rigorously taught, 1 day a week. But if you showed any aptitude, then all of a sudden it could be 2 days a week, or maybe you could have extra. So I got a lot of support there. But everybody said, yeah, but you got to go. You're good at chemistry. You're going to apply to college, and you're going to go be a chemical engineer. So I got to college, and they didn't even have a art program at the college I went to.
Which college?
University of Pennsylvania. And, they sort of did, because the architecture school there is a really good architecture school, really renowned, the graduate architecture program. And those professors went to the Board of Trustees and said, why don't you have an art program here? And the board said, we don't consider it academic or cerebral. It's fluff. And they said, well, how about this? Never mind that piece of ignorance. How about this? If you will give us classroom space, we will staff and run an entire arts program for you, for your undergraduates. So they said, okay, fine. And we had some of, we had Engman and Eisner owlbears and some of the best people floating through there talking. We had no idea. It was pearls before swine, but in retrospect, you realize, whoa, this was really an opportunity. And in 3 years, I'd finished enough credits to graduate, but not in chemistry. If I switched my major to just BA, then I was done. And so I said, Dad, how about that? How about I just graduate not in science? Of course I'll be a chemist, but he said, well, that sounds great. Year of tuition, you know. So I graduated early, got out, and no hope of being a chemist. And, you know, like so many artists, I ended up on construction jobs as handyman, you know, helper, carpenter's apprentice, slowly acquired tools, and was comfortable on a construction site. And meanwhile, let's see, where did I?
How come you didn't decide architecture school?
I took one course in architecture as an undergraduate, and it was all international style, modernism, Corbusier. It was.
There, look over there.
Okay. It was just not. It was not. It was insulting. I mean, that approach to architecture, the building as a machine for living, was very environmental not. It was very abusive to the environment. So it didn't have any appeal to me. And then, so I said, I'll never do that. That's never something I'm going to do.
But did it inform you of, like, this is what building's doing these days?
No, it was.
Like, to avoid. Like, did it become part of your philosophy? Like, okay, I don't want to just be a mass-producing machine architect or a builder.
I thought it was fake, and you know, it's interesting. A lot of people, over the years, have said that. They said, you know, architecture school's a great place to learn about design and solving problems in a very reiterative way, but it's not a great way to learn how to make a building. They don't know about nuts and bolts in architecture schools.
Why?
Because they're all about the design. So design, just to back up a little bit, because then ultimately I ended up at Yale School of Architecture. I mean, which is by some estimates supposed to be the best design architectural school for design in the country. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. They do focus on design. They get all the nuts and bolts out of the way. The first freshman year, they just take the first year incoming class, and they say, draw up a building that we've commissioned, you know, a real building, whether it's a house or we built a medical center for coal miners in West Virginia. And then they say, okay, you've drawn this up. You think you've designed it? Now build it. And we had to figure out, with the help of instructors, you know, everything from code and permits to list of materials and how you manipulate them and what code requires. And that was like just the most unbelievable experience for me. I thought, this is the way to go. And unfortunately, at Yale, the idea was, if you draw up a building, you really don't know what the consequences of your lines are. But if you go out and build it, then when you draw a line next time, you'll know, oh, I know how many studs are in that line. I know I know what this stuff represents. And so when we got out to building it, we just got out to building it. And the only thing that we designed on site was stuff that we'd forgotten to design in the studio ahead of time. So I got out of there, and through a weird sequence of events, I found myself in Warren one day, having an argument with my wife at the time. And she said, you know, we could just live here instead of in the house that you've just designed for us back in Connecticut. And I said, I'm going to call her bluff. I said, you know, we could just live here, fine. If you want to live here, I know an architect I could work here for. And she said, who? And I said, Dave Sellers. I think he might hire me. He's a Yaley. I'm a Yaley. What the hell? It's worth a try. So I called her bluff, and she said, good, well, let's buy that house. And we did, and we ended up here. And fortunately, Dave did hire me, and I said, Dave, look, I'm really interested in this design build thing. I want to be on the site because the thing that people don't understand about design build is
where did it come from? And is it like, was it, talk about how it influenced you if it was not part of your own.
It's the artist's way to make buildings. Because if you think about artists, now any kind of artist, what do? They have usually an emotional starting point or something. It could be external. It could like, look at that beautiful tree. Or it could be internal, like I don't know where to go with my angst over the Middle East. I mean, it could be anything, but it's usually emotional. And then what the artist does is make something. Whether it's music or dance or sculpture or drawing, they make something and that externalizes imperfectly that emotion. So now you have a thing out here in the world, in the physical world, that's supposed to somehow reflect that inner emotion, but it never does. Not 100%. But now you're in conversation with it. So now you can go back and say, well, that's sort of got some of the qualities of that tree, but it needs more blue, or it needs to bend this way more. It needs whatever it needs. And then you do that. And then when you do that, you're having the conversation. Okay, well, that's better, but this part's wrong now. And so you're going back and forth, adjusting and looking and adjusting and looking. And that's making. And that's artful making, where you're in conversation with an externality that you've made in response to an internal emotion. Design build is the architectural equivalent of that, because it's not design and build, which was what Yale was teaching. You design it, now you go build it. You externalize that emotional piece enough to make a cardboard model or a series of outline drawings. Then you go out and you experience the site, the actual site, with the sun and the rain and the snow, and you start building. And as you're building that first idea, on site you recognize, wow, this window here doesn't belong here, it belongs over there. Look at that view. That's a stunning but very small view. I need to frame that. This window's going over here. You just move it. And then say, oh, but wait, if I move that window, what's it look like from the outside when you look at the architect? Oh, well, it looks different. Oh, well, maybe we should, so you start having a sculptural relationship with a full-on building. And what's so great about it, there's a good and a bad. What's great about it is the building moves slowly enough so you can really process all the nuances of making a building. The downside is that buildings are expensive and they need to get done. So people are, like, when's my house going to be ready? I want my house. Say, well, we had to move the window. But that's design build, and so that's how I ended up in this valley. That's how I ended up working with Dave for forever. But because this is where my drawing skills actually didn't help me out, because Dave quickly realized, oh, he can draw anything. So I can give him a ridiculous little sketch and say, make that into something that we're going to vacuum form out of polyurethane shells. And I could do that. And he would say, that's great. Now do a drawing of a guy walking in the door and, having a great time looking out a window. And I could do that. And so I never got on the construction site. Dave just wanted me to do drawings all the time. So after about 2.5 years, no, 2 years really, I said, Dave, I hired on here to be a design builder. I want to be on site and be part of that process. If you're not going to let me do that, then I need to move on. And he said, no, absolutely, you're going to be on. The next project is coming up in a month, and you're going to be on it. And that came and went. I was still in the studio, drawing away. And so I just said, here's the deal, Dave. I have this idea about a school. I want to start this school, a design build school, and I'm going to go do that. I quit. And so that's how Yes Tomorrow got started. And obviously it wasn't any sort of an acrimonious separation. Dave and I have always been buds, and he taught at the school, and I came back and worked on projects for him, and it was the best way to make buildings for somebody of my proclivities, for sure. And if I'm just do a little shout out to Ali Rood's My Design Build Life movie coming up. It's the best sort of explanation of that whole process you could ask for. It really, it's a lovely movie. So then, so that takes me to, I ran a design build company to support the school for the first decade or so, 20 years, 25 years.
Here in Warren.
Yeah, Yes Tomorrow Building Group was, because we would go to people and say, hey, wouldn't you like that screen porch edition? We can do it with students, it'll be great, and it'll be wonderful. Wouldn't you like that mudroom edition? Wouldn't you like that, small, cabin in your backyard? But our classes were only 2 weeks long. And so invariably, by the end of the summer, there was some private client who's saying, well, you can't leave me with this. This is not nearly done. And so then Yes Tomorrow Building Group, which were professional builders, would come in and we'd finish the job. So I was used to running, with subcontracts and workers' comp and crew and all that, which is my hat off to anybody who makes their living in that line of work. It is not an easy way to go. It's physically challenging and it's nerve-wracking. But I did that for a while, and then I did that till Yes Tomorrow really got on its feet, and then I thought, okay, I'm become sort of an administrator here. I like the teaching and I like the site work, but I'm really not following my art. And not only that, my body is probably not going to do this forever. And so, so I could always draw. I said, so how can maybe I can make a living just drawing. And I said, who would that be? Oh, who draws a lot? Animators draw a lot. Maybe I'll be an animator, knowing zero about what the animators do. And, but always liking cartoons. And so I heard about Richard Williams was giving a workshop in Manhattan. It was a 2-day workshop. And this is the guy who invented, who framed Roger Rabbit. And he was a legendary animator. And I said, I called up the number and said, hey, so it was for animators, for very professional animators. I said, I'm not really an animator, but I'm an architect and I know how to draw. So can I take this course? No, you cannot take this course. It's not meant for you. I said, oh, you want to see a portfolio? No, it's just not for you. It's for professional animators. I went, okay. So I kind of thought, okay, that's a clue. And then, like 2 weeks before the program was scheduled to start, I got a phone call and they said, you still want to take it? And I thought, oh, this is just like Yes Tomorrow. They didn't get enough students, so they can't pay the cost of. So I said, yeah, I'll take it. And it was held in this big theater in New York, and there was, I don't know, maybe 100 young, all young, probably between 20 and 30 people there, all very interesting folks. And Williams had these big whiteboards on the stage, and he'd say, now I'm going to teach you how to do a funny walk. And he'd do a sketch really quickly, full sketch like this on one of the whiteboards. And then he'd say, now that's what's called a primary. No, not primary. It's basically you draw, like when you're doing an animation, you draw certain strong poses, primary poses, and then you fill in between. So there's in-between drawings, and then there's the primary poses that you're smoothing out. And so he would draw the primary poses on these big whiteboards, and everybody in the audience was madly drawing to keep up because he's fast, and he was just walking across the thing, drawing them, and then he'd go back and erase them. So everybody was like going like crazy.
And you guys had to fill in the backgrounds, the scenes?
Yeah. and we were doing it on a pad in a theater chair with, you know, bad light, and the whole thing was hopeless. And and I mean, a lot of it was just praise to Richard Williams. Everybody just wanted to be in his presence. But at break, I kind of sort of looked around at the other drawings, and I thought, well, shit, I can do this. This isn't that bad. And so I applied to an animation school in Toronto, or it's just outside of Toronto, called Sheridan. Great story. Yeah, great hood. I miss it.
Huh.
Yeah, no, I like Toronto, but you know, I grew up in New Jersey, and we were allowed to go to New York City at age 13. That's the rule. You can go to New York City on the bus to Port Authority, but you can't, the one rule is you can't go to Harlem and you can't go to the Village. So we go right to Port Authority and go right to Harlem and right to the Village. So Toronto to me was like the cutest little town ever. Also, I'd spent years, I actually drove a cab in Philadelphia, so Toronto looked a little like Philadelphia to me. It's very neighborhood oriented, yeah. So anyway, so I did that, and I did that, right, I just had gotten married to April, and I thought, this is never gonna fly. I've just married this fabulous person. We've just set up here. I've coaxed her back from the West Coast because she was born in Bennington, and she said, she said, I like you, but you're the wrong zip code. I've spent too much time and effort getting out of the snow. And I said, yeah, but please. So anyway, so I didn't think I was going to go to animation school. She said, are you kidding? You've got to go. I didn't know this about April then, but she is not one to stand in the way of anybody's dream. She's, you know, you got to pursue your dreams. So there I was. I spent 3 summers becoming an animator. I would say my skills as an animator were C+ with endless room for improvement. Some of the people that would come from, you know, the East, the Asians, boy, they can, I would just watch them draw and I'd say, you are just like a machine. And they said, here's the problem. You, in the West, what you do is you do a drawing and you go, yeah, and then you fix it, and then you go, yeah, that's good, and then you do a drawing, and then you, yeah, oh, that should be more like that, and fix it. And then he says, we don't work that way. Do a drawing, done. Do a drawing, done. Do a drawing, done. We do it right the first time. And absolutely was the case. And I learned that. I learned, like, okay, I can't think, oh, I'll relate to this like an art piece afterwards and kind of tune it in. No, right the first time, fast and furious. There are other people who work at Disney and other big studios who are artists and do, you know, their specialties. Also, there's like character design. So those guys they'll do a character design and then they have to rotate it through 360 degrees and they'll go, oh, nose doesn't work, or the ears need to be adjusted. So they will reiterate there. But when you're doing production animation, which is where you enter the industry, you're going to be an in-betweener. So you're going to be given a bunch of primary poses, and you say, get this pose to this pose, and you know, and that depending on if it's a smooth, like, you know, 24 images to a second, Disney quality, that's a lot of drawings, and or if it's like a Hanna-Barbera, you know, Yogi Bear type of on 4s, then it's maybe only 4 drawings. But still, you know, you have to convincingly get this pose to that pose, and it has to be believable. And no, you're not being paid enough to be tuning each drawing like it's an art piece. It's got to be right. People would visit us in the studio at Sheridan, and there were so many drawings on the floor, and the, you know, family would come by and stuff, and they go, what is this? This is a great drawing. It didn't work. I mean, you just throw out stuff that people would think, whoa, this is so great. You know, no time for that. So you really learn to draw fast and accurately. And what you sort of started to learn was you're not drawing the thing that's moving. You're drawing the space between the thing that's moving. And it's just a whole different way of looking at stuff. Then I was so excited. I thought, this is great. I don't have to be on a roof. My body can probably do this till the end of my days. I came back to Vermont, and there's zero industry animation industry. There wasn't even the comic book school down in White River Junction at that time. There was just nothing. And so I took, I tried for 2 years, and then I thought that I'd have to move to Montreal, LA, or New York. And having just relocated April from LA, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a pause on this and go back to, making buildings, making small buildings, which is what I did, and teaching. In there, I've taught. Besides the Yes Tomorrow, I've taught everything from inner city Philadelphia kids, where I was the only white dude for easily 10 blocks in any direction. I've taught there at Yes Tomorrow, and then I taught at Yale after I graduated. So I'm pretty big spectrum of trying to explain this stuff to people. I think you compliment me with the presumption of that kind of focus, because I'm almost embarrassed of how lucky I've been in terms of the skill sets I've received. I really pretty much can do anything. I've written books, and I've illustrated them. I've built buildings. It seems like the big question is, what do you do? Because if you can do anything, then what do you do? And for me, at this point, I'm also have enough rings in the tree. If you cut me in half, I had a lot of rings, so that I think I have some perspective on how you do this thing called living a life. So what I'm interested in doing is being in conversation with other people. I've had lots of conversations with me, do the drawing or the sculpture and back and forth. And I love doing that. And I could do that for the rest of my days. But what happens is if somebody wants something, and usually this runs afoul of the profit motive, which I'm terrible at. I don't really care about making money, but you have to charge or else people won't take you seriously. But, if people want something, usually they don't know how to get it. They don't know even how to think about it, whether it's a house or a memorial or a monument or a drawing or a card or a poster or whatever it is. They don't really know how to do it. Architecture trains you to solve any problem because it's a reiterative problem-solving thing. You go, okay, what's the problem? State the problem, take a shot at it, assess the results, take another shot. And it's reiterative. You go round and round, and that's why you hear so much about design thinking now. Is because designers, Father's probably an excellent example, can go at a thing from a lot of different angles, learning from each angle, and then bringing it together. So what I need is I need an audience that needs that. I like to be needed. I like to help. I'm a teacher, so right now I have a sort of a specialty reputation for tree houses. It's not exactly a wide open market that has a constant stream of projects, but I have tree houses. There's one over there that's a big one. So when people, that's a pretty great thing. I love doing tree houses because a tree house is like the entire environmental movement. So thing about building a tree house is sort of like it's sort of like a metaphor for the human condition on this earth, in the sense that you want to be as close as possible to this cool spot up in the tree with the view and the smell of the tree and the leaves and the light, and oh God, you just want to do that so much. And you climb up there and you sit in the crotch of the tree and you say, yes, this is it. I want to be right here. I'm going to make it so I can sleep overnight here and be here. This is great. And I'm going to, if you don't think about the health of the tree, you'll inadvertently kill it. If you kill the tree, bye-bye treehouse. It's sort of a metaphor for what we're doing globally. If we don't honor the environment and the natural way of things, everything that we so value as our culture is going to go because it will not be supported. And so when I'm doing a treehouse, we teach treehouse construction at Yes Tomorrow, and that's obvious, one of the subtle handoffs. But I like doing tree houses because people really don't know how to do them healthily, so that the tree is, the way I do them, the trees are likely to live longer because of the tree house than they are without the tree house, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I work with, if you know, Bill DeVos is this famous arborist who, coast to coast. He's actually not an arborist, he's a tree preservationist. And I've learned so much about silviculture from him. So yeah, he's won awards with some of the tree houses that he's helped me build.
So that sounds like
it's tree work.
Trees and people need each other. It sounds like
we all need each other, but
well, I know we need each other, but like trees, do trees need people? No, they just need trees, other trees. Like I imagine trees are social too.
Extremely, right? With the mushrooms.
With the mushrooms.
Yeah.
And
very social, and they communicate chemically back and forth instantaneously.
Yeah, I know. It's
so you put a nail in a tree.
Yeah.
Here, there's a chemical response in the trees all around. Seriously.
So how do you manage that when you're building a tree house?
So it turns out the lifeblood of a tree is in the cambium layer, the outside, let's say, inch. That's where the fluids go up and down to the photosynthesis and down to the roots to get the minerals in. And the interior of the tree is what the treehouse builder wants. That's the structure. That's the heartwood. And that's alive, but it's not keeping the tree alive. That's past growth. And it's very much alive, but that's also the structure. And a tree, as you might imagine, just responds to the slightest variation in wind or climate or sun or whatever, and it puts on cell growth in response to, if you go to the top of a mountain, you'll see the trees are all flagged over, and you can tell which way the prevailing wind comes from, because they grow to minimize it. So if you can minimize your damage to the cambium layer, which we've got to the point where we can get it down to like a little hole this big, that we can drill in past the cambium layer, and it heals over this we call it a Garnier limb, so that the cambium layer is completely healed, but you have now 5,000 pounds of support from the core of the tree. And so you put in a few of those and you can support, something like that. And that is the biggest tree house I've ever made. That's in 5 red maples. And I made it for the previous owners of the pitcher, and it rents for $2,000 a night.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a luxury resort that they or retreat that they have, but
yeah.
But it's a marvel because the arborist won a national award for the cabling on this tree, because it has to meet hurricane and public facility standards. It has to, it has, in fact, while we were building it, it has to be able to withstand a hurricane. So we had a hurricane. And, the way trees deal with a hurricane is the first thing they do is the wind picks up, they curl their leaves. And then if that doesn't work, then they sort of bend over they're always trying to present less and less resistance to the wind. And then if the wind keeps coming up, then they just start shedding their leaves. And it's all, and so we studied that, and you can't see it here, but this eventually had a stairwell. The stairwell's back there. And the building inspector said, you have to cover that. That has to be a covered stairway, for code purposes. So we said, oh boy, if we have a hard stairwell covered, that's not going to be very treehouse-like. People aren't going to feel like they're getting up in the trees. So we built these big wire armatures and put Sunbrella fabric on them with Velcro that sort of hang over the stairs like big ferns. And if the wind comes up, it does just what a tree does. It bends. It bends to the extent that it can. And if the wind keeps coming up, then it lets go of the Velcro and blows away. It's perfect. And we were able to talk the inspector into it, which was pretty great.
Huh.
So that's one thing I would love to do more of. Making any kind of a building these days is so prohibitively expensive that making a tree house and doing it properly is this very small market. And so I'm happy if I can get one a year. It's sort of like straw bale construction. It had a time when all the building magazines spoke about tree houses or straw bale or whatever they were selling that. But in actual market, it's like log homes, timber frame structures, straw bale, tree houses. These are all niche markets that will always have people who want them because they satisfy something in their soul. They're not just a fabricated, prefab of some sort. So prefab is particularly in the snow belt, prefab makes tremendous sense because it's obviously it's built under controlled conditions. Same people build it. The quality of the materials ends up being better because they're not sitting under snow and rain, on the construction site while the thing's being built. They're in a factory on an assembly line. So you have great materials. You have great craftsmen who are doing the same thing pretty much over and over again. So it's not like each house is they know what they're doing. They're specialized. So the quality of the construction is great. The materials are great. The technology is state of the art, in terms of insulation and ceiling and window quality and doors.
Are they more affordable?
They are more affordable because they are, I'll come back to that. That is a little bit of it's not a myth. It's true. They're more affordable, but they're more affordable because they're just cheaper. They're more affordable primarily because when you build on an assembly line, you have to answer all your questions up front. You have to know what the tile's going to be in the bathroom. You have to know where the light fixtures are going to go, all that stuff, because it's going to be put in the factory. And most people who build houses say, well, the color of the tile, we'll get to that when we see the bathroom. We want to see the bathroom before we can do the tile. Can't do that with prefab. So the way it becomes really more affordable is when you finally get your date on the assembly line, you know everything. You've answered all the questions, and the factory has said, okay, you've checked every box. We're ready to give you a date on our assembly line. See, you can't have a date before that because if anything ever went wrong during your assembly on the assembly line and they had to stop, that would stop all the projects behind you and all the projects in front of you. So it would be horrendously expensive. You couldn't possibly afford it. So you have to have everything put to bed. What that means is when they give you your date on the assembly line, you also know your date for the day it's going to show up on your site. To the day. Maybe plus or minus one day if there's a rainstorm or something. So what that means is you can tell your subs who have to connect the plumbing and connect the heating and do one thing and another. You can say, I want you here on this day. Not around this day to connect this stuff up. And they do. And so it's really efficient compared to traditional construction where the plumber gets there and he says, this wall's not really insulated yet, so I can't really finish the plumbing. I'll come back when your insulator gets this stuff done. And then you can't get him back and then the insulator says, yeah, but that's too small a thing. I got this big job over here. None of that happens. It's really, really great to see it snap together. Yes, there is stuff on site that you can then do to customize it. Like you can, the decks and patios and landscaping and, you can leave parts of the interior unfinished too and say, oh, I want to build in this custom desk workspace, whatever.
Instead of what was,
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's getting harder, but for my tenure, I was always able to go to them and say, you know, you guys aren't using the state-of-the-art insulation. You need to use this insulation. You need to use, I want you to use these windows, not the windows you use. And they would do it. Particularly, they're not as good at it currently, but they'll still do it. Huntington Homes, the only prefab factory in the state of Vermont. Great family-run business, been there for 2 generations. Jason's doing a great job. They all, during the downturn, they went out to the Cape and Islands and made bank with these massive custom prefab things coming over on the boat and just, and I remember talking to Jason, who's the owner, and he said, yeah, but it put us in a market that we can't sustain, and we don't want to sustain. We want to help Vermonters get homes. So he said, don't ask me to do the triple crown molding that wraps around. He said, we're not doing that anymore. We're doing affordable, solid housing, which is great. It's, you know, so I should say here that my approach towards residential design is you start with the site, you look at the site, then you look at the people who want to live there. And what you're doing is you're making a portrait of them in that site. So you really have to understand their lifestyle and what they want, why do they want to live there? Why is it, and who are they? Is it all about just the cheapest thing they can get? Or do they have, you know, do they have a passion, or do they have a thing that will make their life better if they have the house this way instead of that way? Oftentimes, when you ask people, well, what do you want? They have no clue because they're not used to asking themselves, what do I want? They're saying, what can I put up with? That's their MO. And so a lot of times I have to say, hey, it's all right to ask for the moon. I mean, I'm probably the guy who can give it to you if anybody can. And probably at your budget. Or if not, something as close as your budget will support. I mean, so that makes me not 100% traditional as an architect, because I would say I'm without ego, but I don't need to have my ego smeared all over your home. Your home is your home. That's why I started Yes Tomorrow. It's so people could be in there on the design process. But going forward, every once in a while I get a client who says, yeah, but I want you to do a portrait of me on my site. I don't have time to do it. I have the money to hire you and build it. Those are, yeah, I love those people. They're great. And, you know, and that leads to other stuff like this was it's a memorial. So it's a sort of a hilarious story. This black woman, already that's amazing, the black woman in Vermont, there's so few. But she showed up and she said, I was told you could help me with a memorial for women of color who have lost their lives in LA. We have a little spot, we have a little budget, and we're trying to get this memorial made. And I said, God, I'd love to do that. And I said, why are you asking an old white dude to do a memorial for fallen women of color? And she said, because there are no black, you know, designers that I know of in here, and I'm just here because my husband is a skier. And I said, okay, so you're going back to LA? She said, yes. So this was, you know, started. It's this women, and the concept was really hers. I was really making it happen, but she said, I want a tree that's sort of protecting these fallen women, and we got about this far, and when I said, you realize this is a big budget item, and like most of my clients, they don't really know what a big budget item means. So when she found out about it, she said, I don't think we have that much money. And they aborted the project. But it was just, I had so much fun. I think I must have worked 5 hours for maybe 10 hours for every hour I got paid. It was a work of love. And it allowed me to put some of what Randy Bretson and myself and a few others have been running a life drawing class in the valley here for a year or so. It looks like it's going to move over to the Big Pick. And, this. I suppose if I was going to do a traditional art form going forward, if going back to your first question, if without clients, I would definitely do representational human 3D sculpture. I would be somewhere between Rodin and Henry Moore. And the problem with art and artists, as you probably know, is they're really good at being prolific and productive, but then where do you put it all? Where do you put it all? So that's another good reason to have a client. They take it away.
Here's your star.
This is Henrietta, inspired by Henry Moore sculpture.
Yeah, totally.
And here she is in 3D.
Yeah.
And so this takes place when a night watchman, she falls she's just sitting on the plinth, in the museum, and that she falls in love with this night watchman. And wants to, but it turns out that he's actually involved in organized crime. And so then the story proceeds from there. But she is trying to get him to notice her, and he's trying to steal art and basically come off as a night watchman. And I don't even know, that. So these are like in between drawings. Let's see. So you get, they don't even look like they're different, right? I don't know if you can see them. They're all in blue because you don't ink them until you get the motion right. But we're basically going from that in this little scene, this little mini scene. Oh, I didn't even finish that one. The hell is that? The ink is like fading or something, or I'm using the wrong pencil. Eventually, let's see. So see, from that one to this one, you can start to see movement, and then you start to see more movement, and this is the difference between each one of these determines how fast Henrietta is swinging her head back and forth. And then eventually, she's sort of nodding, and then, or saying, shaking her head, and then eventually you get, her head's totally turned around. Let's see, am I going to be able to?
You could turn them into a flip book.
Well, we do. The way. See, and this is how you to get.
This?
This thing, yeah. That's a shot sheet, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Here, let's turn this. Huh.
So the art, this is I think it's a Hans Holbein, and in the animation, all the paintings on the wall of the museum have to come alive and start to weigh in on the antics.
When you flip. Okay.
So he starts.
Yep.
Can you get that? No. Boom. So these are pretty dramatic changes. So I would have to do a lot of drawings in between to smooth out.
So how'd you come up with this character? Like, were you just...
It's a Hans Holbein.
That's just a Hans Holbein, yeah.
I didn't come up with it. I just ripped it off.
Yeah.
That's another fun thing about this particular animation story. It takes place in an art museum, so I get to actually create little miniatures of all my favorite art pieces.
Right.
Here he is talking. Right?
Wow.
What I need to do is have a manageable little project that I could do, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet. Oh, get the Ben and Jerry's diner. Oh, right. I mean, I have. See, there you go. There's our guy. Let's see if there's more. These were studies from I went to the museum and I said, can I get like when you guys are closed, can I get a,
Which museum?
it was, what is it, ICA in Toronto? Is that what it's called?
Institute
Contemporary Art?
Contemporary Art or
No.
I mean, there's the School of College of Art and Design.
No, I think it was the ICA.
ICA.
They had one room for this sculpture of Henry Morse. And I asked if I could have a time when the museum was closed to photograph it. They said, no, you couldn't possibly. It would cost way too much. And that's not mine, but maybe there's something in it. Let's see.
Life drawing?
Yeah, this is all
Some of your life drawing?
the down head. Yes, on loan. Now we're going to need a white piece of paper. Big white piece of paper. Have you been into, I sometimes laugh, have you ever been into John Anderson's studio?
Oh yeah.
I mean, not a trapdoor, a porch that falls off of a tree house. It sort of, not falls off, it opens up like a drawbridge. It's a concept sketch, and this is all the mechanics would actually work. And we had this, for this client, this was a treeless tree house in Miami Beach. So these were some concept sketches. This whole tree house sits on this concrete post. And then this one, how this work? This was what it would look like on the inside. You saw that one. And then these were just ideas that, I mean, these just come out of there's that one. This is with a more curvilinear railing, smaller. This is one with, in plan, would look like this. Bed and little sitting area, bathroom. And then this was inspired by an acorn. The thing is, all of these are fully buildable. I build all of these, no problem. That's what's so great about drawing. If you can draw a thing representationally, you probably can build it.